Hey everybody, this is Kevin Sabourin with Rethinking Everything and the Rethinking Dad blog. And today I have the good fortune of interviewing our friend and former RE speaker, Rebecca Thompson. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kevin.
How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is terrific. Thank you for joining me. Rebecca is teaching me some things about online technology and recording interviews. We're actually trying her service today, so this is fun. We're experimenting. So yeah, thanks for joining me. For those of you that you may or may not know this, but Rebecca and Trey and my wife Kelly and I are all good friends in the Tampa, St. Pete area and have the opportunity to connect periodically with our friend Rebecca. So this is a treat to do this online today and share a little bit of what I've come to know about Rebecca with the rest of you guys. So as Rebecca and I were saying a minute ago, this is, when we were chatting before this is really sort of a fireside chat, casual, get to know you sort of an opportunity so we can learn a little bit more about what Rebecca's working on and doing these days. So thanks again and welcome. You're going to be at the Rethinking Conference this year, 2015. First question I have for you is coming out of the 2014 event. You know, now you've had a sense for what goes on in some of these unschooled conferences. Do you have any takeaways or specific things you're listening for in our audience this year?
It's a really great question. I had such a great time last year getting to meet so many families, and everybody is just on their own path, and it's just so cool. It's so cool to be just in this whole big group of people who are all looking at things a little bit differently, and there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else like it. And I love the work that I do allowed me to kind of get in quiet spaces with some of those families and, hear a little bit more about what was going on for them and their experiences. So I'm really looking forward to that again. I'm looking forward to that, kind of getting into those quiet spaces and hearing what people are concerned with, because those of us who are parenting a little bit differently, who are schooling differently, we have some different challenges and concerns, and we certainly, when we're wanting some support, we want someone who kind of gets what we're trying to do, where we're going, and that it's not the kind of thing, it's not a destination. It's not, well, now I've arrived. We're going to have things pop up. As a parent who's unschooling my son, my youngest son, things pop up.
Daily. Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I started with that question was I'm always interested to hear, whether it's from the attendees or past speakers or future speakers, what's the anticipation? What are the intentions? What are the takeaways? Because I know how dynamic and fluid those conferences can be. For those of you that come to this through the Rethinking Dad blog, you may not be yet familiar with Rethinking Everything as an organization is a 19-year-old conference with roots in unschooling and has diversified itself outside of unschooling. And now, rather than simply rethinking education, we rethink, whole family living, not to exclude the individual, but it's, conscious living. We're largely a family-oriented event, but it's really conscious living. And in that conscious living, for young families especially, requires a focus on education. So that's how we hold true to our origins and unschooling and yet broaden the scope to full life living. So, and the full life living is not only in the now, but in the past, because whatever happened in the past got us to where we are at today. And one of the most fascinating sessions from last year, the most well-received and certainly, I don't want to say controversial, but thought-provoking, was the birth story session that you did. Can you give us a short overview on what that looked like?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, I guess it's been 5 years now, I had the fortune of connecting with a gentleman named Ray Castellino, and he's part of an organization, the Pre and Perinatal Psychology Movement, which is a 30-year movement looking at how we come into the world and how that influences and shows up in our daily life as adults, how it shows up in interactions that we have with our kids, how our child's birth story, the way that they came into the world, shows up in their transitions. And so it gives us a unique way of looking at the conflicts that we may be having with our kids. And it gives us a different way to actually be really respectful and go move into that space with them and work with that story, rather than, oh, they're being, a pain, or, they just need to quit it, or they just need to, move on, or, just, I'm going to put them in timeout and this will go away, when it's actually a really amazing opportunity for us to connect. When we start looking at it, I did an interview a couple months ago with a woman who was talking about hidden story. And her name's Annie. I'm trying to think of her last name. Annie. Anyway, I'll think of it. And she talked about how our hidden story, we don't know it. Like, we know the story of, well, I was born in Delaware and then we moved to Minnesota and then, I moved to Indiana again and we got, like, we know that story. That's the obvious one,
Official stuff.
Yeah, right. Here, put it on my passport, it's where I've been, this is what I've been doing. But we don't look at this other idea, this other story, and it's the story that's in our bodies. It's the story that when we're born, because most people think, and when I first heard this idea, I went, it's crazy. This is just really, like, really, you're trying to tell me that my baby or me, as an adult, that I'm influenced by something that happened how many years ago? Right. But we have somatic memory, body memory, and every experience that we have creates a memory in our cells. And we repeat those patterns over and over and over again. And if we're stuck in a pattern, let's say our birth was overwhelming to us, not even that it was traumatic, but just that for us it was overwhelming, we will keep repeating that pattern over and over and over again until we complete it in some way.
Interesting how that sticks with you so long. I hear a lot of talk, or, I've read some things about sort of the body kind of redesigning itself over us. It seems like 7 years is kind of the conventional wisdom, that span, whether it's your blood or, your chemical composition or skin cells or whatever. But yet this sort of cognitive, the memory at the cell level, for some reason that doesn't go away.
Right. Not by itself.
Not by itself. So why is, I wonder why that
is. It's interesting, because what I see is that, so let's say a child comes into the world and they had a really difficult birth and they were, really, really fussy in that early time. And let's just say, like most parents, we're just like, you're fussy, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna do my best, and I'm gonna make sure that you're clean and you're dry, and, that you get your, the food that you need, and we're just gonna move through it. But it creates patterns in the relationship right then and there.
Right.
And without mindfulness, we just keep repeating those relationship patterns. It becomes grooved in our brains, the pattern of relationship.
Sure.
And one of the things that I do is called healing stories, and it's creating the space to kind of rewrite those cellular stories with our children. So it's not that we're stuck with them. You can do this with adults too, but we can create the space to make that different. We just have to be able to acknowledge part of that hidden story to be able to do it. It's not like we're stuck with it.
It was really interesting to me now, as a father of 3, to see the different growing up phases, especially through sort of toddler age with all 3 kids, because the world changed when they became more able to express themselves. Expressing themselves in ways that I could more clearly understand really taught me, or showed me an example of what I didn't understand prior to that 2 or 3-year-old ability to express, right? So those patterns that you talk about, I can remember them. I mean, there's sort of this visceral, this feeling in my gut and in my chest about remembering certain instances with the kiddos that probably repeated themselves until such a point as they were able to tell me or Kelly what was going on. And then you look back, it's like, oh gosh, we wasted 2 years by not, listening carefully enough. that something was going on. So I was really grateful for those years that we got it. And a bit unfair to our oldest, but with practice, we were better with the third. Certainly,
it's always the oldest.
Yeah, right? She's tough, she's been teaching us things from the word go, but she definitely taught us a mountain on her first 3 years, no doubt. So yeah, I think that's a really neat session, and I certainly would love to be a part of that again. I had a little opportunity to hear you last year, not only at the conference, we were very busy moving around, but also locally here in St. Pete when you did a session, and I thought that was pretty spectacular too. At the time, you were developing a tribe, a consciously parenting tribe. Can you tell me about that project and how that's going for you?
Mm-hmm, sure. So I kept having these experiences with my clients, and my clients are all around the world. And I was having a conversation with one of them, and she was in Boston, and she was saying, nobody gets what I'm doing. Nobody understands the way I'm trying to parent. I'm by myself. And then the next day I talked to a mom in New Zealand, and she's saying the same thing. I live in rural New Zealand. There's nobody who gets what I'm trying to do. Nobody understands. And then the later that day I talked to a mom in rural Georgia. Nobody understands what I'm trying to do with my child. And I just went, you all need to talk to each other because you have more in common than you have different. Right. You're parenting from a place of awareness. It's not that you're on a particular path, that you've got to do it this way. It's that you're looking and trying to figure out what's going to work best for you and your family. And so there's a lot of spaces where it's, if you're doing it this way, we'll support you, but not if you're finding your own path, we'll help you find what that is for you. Right. And so I really wanted to create a space where we could gather together and have conversations and have support. And so I have been, I'm in my second, almost third year now, we have weekly calls where they can gather and connect with each other, whoever wants to come as part of the tribe. And then we have lots and lots of resources that I've created over almost 8 years now, interviews and other resources that they have access to as part of that tribe. So I'm taking a little bit of a hiatus right now. I'm getting ready to get married, so there's that. But also I'm really trying to make the tribe user friendly. The feedback that I got on what I had going was that, hey, we're constantly on our cell phones, and it doesn't. It's a little clunky on the cell phone. And so we're completely reworking it because we know that parents are pretty much using these to communicate with the world, get their information. And so we're trying to make that a little bit easier for everybody.
Sounds good. So, hey, since you brought it up, getting married, it's what, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks away?
It's 13 days.
13 days.
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting. It's coming up.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that don't know, Rebecca and Trey post a lot of sunset pictures. And so I'm wearing my beach t-shirt today in honor of your sunset photos. I love that. What's the significance of the sunset?
So it was interesting. I met Trey in December a couple years back, and we were talking about New Year's resolutions. And he said, I want to go to sunset every day for the next year.
Nice.
Okay, maybe not every single day, but I just want to do the best that I can. It really feels important. I want to go. I want to take a picture. I want to watch the sun move across the sky. I just want to do that. I want to take that time for me. And I went, that sounds great. I'll join you. I think I'd known him for about a month at this point. And but we had really, really hit it off. And so for a year, almost every single night we went to the sunset and really got to. We could walk. It was in our neighborhood. We went in the rain. We went, in thunderstorms, sat in the car. We went when it was really cold, sat in the car. We went when it was really hot. We watched the sun move across the sky. We watched it come back again. And, it got earlier in the day and then it got later in the day. So there was this rhythm and it was just amazing. And it was just I think it was just this act of appreciating every moment.
Yeah.
And taking the time to just stop and do that every day. And we missed, probably a dozen, over the year. But it was just this beautiful time for us to just stop whatever else was going on, whatever we were doing, and just be together and just really be present.
I think that's fantastic. I love it. And now that you bring it up, I know you've shared parts of that story with me. I don't know if you told me that whole thing, but your Facebook posts give me that momentary pause where I stop and take those photographs in every single day. And I know they're coming. And fortunately I live close to a sunset as well here on the beach. And, but it's still, I always pause and look at yours. So it's a nice presence reminder. I'm a big fan of the sunrise, and not that I make it every day. Actually, just as happy when I don't make it. It means I've had a good night's sleep. But
right.
I love the sunrise because of the starting the new day, and new opportunity abounds, and some of those things too. And not that I see the sunset as an end of something, but certainly a transitional moment that generates presence. I also find that my kids have a sense, a way of like a magic way of knocking me back into the moment. Some attention grabbing thing that they do that just pulls me back in. So those are two constant presence reminders. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about tribe earlier, and specifically like the Georgia, New Zealand examples of far and wide. And there's this common link among these folks, but even though they're scattered far and wide. We're starting a little project this year aimed at helping out dads called the Rethinking Dad. So the Rethinking Everything organization, as a co-owner, I'm going to grab the title of the Rethinking Dad so we could write or share stories by dads, for dads, from dads, in an attempt to shed some light on the transition between the old paradigm, fatherhood, and the new role. The new role being one of more collaboration, patience, partnering, consciousness, awareness, a lot of words that are in our wheelhouse here, but and less of the, or none of the domineering, disciplinarian, authoritarian, it's happening this way because I said so. But also we want to create an environment where we can help guys put down these notions that, my sole task is protector, provider. It's so much more homogenous than that. And my experience has been now a number of years at RE, doing SUDS group and men's nights and some of these things that there's a resistance on the part of a lot of guys to make themselves vulnerable. Meaning reach out and say, hey, this doesn't feel exactly right. And I don't know why. I don't know where to talk about it because in my mind, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm not supposed to show any weakness. And yet at the same time, it's incongruent because I'm living a conventional lifestyle on the work side. And then I come home to a more alternative lifestyle at home, and I have trouble reconciling these things. So that's a long-winded preamble to what the Rethinking Dad is all about, but I think it paints a pretty complete picture. Tell me, how does that show up in your world when you're doing therapy or counseling or offering advice or writing? What does that look like as far as the role of the dad and his function in the family these days?
I love dads.
Yeah, me too.
I do. I really do. I so honor dads who are willing to even start looking at some of this stuff. They are the coolest people ever. And so I get the pleasure of getting to meet those dads. Those are the ones who show up. Those are the ones who come to appointments. Those are the ones that I'm on Skype with, with their wives trying to work through stuff. And so, I know that it's quite a journey to go, just like you were just describing. Most dads now grew up in a family that was very different and saw roles that were so different than what they're trying to do now. And that gap between, for many of the dads who are still working in conventional jobs, I'll bet I keep hearing stories of, dads who are maybe working in an office, but, the wife finds out later that He's been talking about baby wearing to all of his coworkers, or he's been talking about, unschooling and what a cool thing it is, to all of his coworkers, because it's like they need a place, and it's neat. The ones who really start getting it are like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. But it's a huge shift. It's a paradigm shift. It's not just, all right, we're going to do something different now. It's when you start looking at some of these things, you can't see anything else the same anymore. It changes everything. You start looking at, well, wait, what are we eating? Wait a minute, oh, wait. So, wow, how are we going to spend our money? Or, what is my role in this family? And really looking at that and having those conversations. And so that's what I see. I mean, and maybe I'm just really, really fortunate because I get to see those dads who are doing it, who are getting in there and who are figuring it out, and who are really defining what they want their family to look like together in partnership. And then there are still the dads who are coming along who aren't really quite sure of this whole thing.
Right.
And that's a tender place to be.
Tender place to be, indeed. That's a great way to phrase it. I read an article about it had to do with anger and relationships, and basically it went on to say, cut to the chase, that as boys, one of the few emotions that sort of culture deems appropriate, or society deems appropriate for you to express, is anger. Anything else is, don't be a such and such, or, buck up and deal with it, or something like that. This, what would be maybe identified as a moment of weakness, if there's tears shed or uncertainty or anything like that, is usually met with, sort of toughen up and deal with it as a response. And, it's amazing, like, how, I wonder how deep that is and how far back that goes and what sort of conditioning is there. I hear myself saying a lot that my observation is that moms usually bring, like, say, unschooling or conscious living, they're oftentimes on the forefront, bringing the ideology to the home. And I've always sort of not justified it, rationalized it, that there's more emotional intelligence or intuition, predominant in the gender. And it might be conditioning, it might be DNA, it could be evolution, it could be a lot of things. But I just wonder, I don't want to write the guys off. Like, I don't want to say you don't have it in you. It's there, for sure it's there. But it's just buried down deep and way in the back door. You know what I mean? I don't know if that made sense, but
yeah. There's so much cultural story about, this is what guys are supposed to do, and there's a lot of the ways that we parent boys in particular help them to disconnect from their own guidance, their own intuition, and they have it too,
right.
But they don't have the practice in flexing those muscles a lot. Now, there are some dads who are the ones who are the dragger. They're the ones who are out there, unschooling. Oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. Or, here, read this book about co-sleeping. There are those dads who are out there, but I think that it's pretty much, it's much more common, I think, to have those dads who are, a little bit less connected, who are not quite so sure where they stand on things, who aren't really sure about this whole process that we're, what's wrong with the way that we did it before?
Right.
Why do we need to change? And, but I've also seen a lot of flexibility from dads once they get the information, once they get the recognition, once they have a space for their concerns to be heard.
Right.
I'm worried that he's going to grow up and people are going to beat him up if we parent this way. I'm worried that, whatever it is for that dad.
Like, maybe he won't be ready for the world as I know it, where he has to be the protector and the provider. So
right.
give him those skills. it's kind of like, hunting way back, tribal world. It's, here's what we do today. We get up and we stay physically strong and we eat what we kill, and, and we live to see another day. We're different. We're different now.
Yeah.
I think, tapping this emotional intelligence and training this body wisdom and listening to our intuitive guidance is what will serve us in the future as we move into the new story. So we talked about the story. You mentioned the story a minute ago. One of our other speakers this year, Charles Eisenstein, he talks about the space between the stories. And I like that a lot because it's this, old paradigm, new paradigm. And most of what we're experiencing in our, decades here on Earth is the transition between, as we evolve into our best self. So with that comes discomfort, here comes joy, there comes a lot of things. But I think we're as much in between a story now as we've ever been as we move towards the new one.
So true.
But how does that show up for you in your daily practice? Like, what are some of the top couple things, 2 or 3 things that you deal with regularly, like internally within the family? What are their biggest struggles?
Partnerships and, being able to navigate, especially when parents are doing things differently, and creating the space so that everybody can feel seen and heard and felt. We don't have skills to do that. So I work a lot with couples for that. And they're the foundation of the family. If we can't get this working right, feeling good, then a lot of the other things are, not going to feel good either.
Sure.
So that's probably the biggest thing. And then a lot of challenges with different behaviors, and either that what they've tried with their kids hasn't worked, or what they know to do either doesn't work or doesn't feel good. And they don't want to parent in the way maybe that they were parented or the way that they see other parents handling these situations, but they don't know what else to do. And so I see a lot of that, like with my unschooling families. We want to give them freedom, but yet this isn't feeling good. This isn't working. But I don't want to infringe upon their freedom and take stuff away, but yet I'm completely miserable and I'm sleep deprived and this isn't working for me. And so how do you navigate that and hold everybody's needs in a way that's respectful? So I work a lot with that within families.
Sounds like a lot of boundaries and balance discussions there.
Mm-hmm.
Setting boundaries for yourself. So the desire to not impose rules, especially arbitrary rules, on somebody else, and yet honor the self and by setting your own boundaries and simultaneously trying to create a homogenous environment where everybody has equity and is really, really partnering.
Right.
We, interestingly, we had a conversation, very impromptu conversation back at the home here about a couple hours ago on summertime travel plan. And we like to take our RV and head up north in the cool weather and spend a couple of months. And one child had some thoughts about when we were going to get away, and the other one was sort of predisposed to want to stay, and the third one weighed in. And the fact that I'm mentioning that first is probably indicative of, we really feel like, they have a vote, and this isn't just we're blowing past you to do what we want to do. At the same time, most of us want to do this, so we're going to figure out a way to do it. So it's always interesting trying to navigate those waters. And ultimately, I feel like we've created an environment where once everybody feels empowered and they have a say, no matter what we end up doing, the trip's going to feel pretty good. And, maybe a wrinkle here or there, but, this buy-in component, like this, we all came to this agreement, and then we go through and we do it, and we don't really think much about it again. It's not like the kids say, well, I said I was going to do this, now I have to see it through because I made this commitment, rah, rah, rah. It's really, the buy-in is, I'm in, let's do this. It should mostly work out. Some days it won't. And I don't know how we achieve that, but somehow, at least in that chapter, it seems to have worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
We did that in Peru, and we did it in Costa Rica, and now we'll do it in the RV this year. So it's pretty cool.
I think it's so important. And what you're kind of describing is that you're creating a space where everybody has a voice and everyone can be heard and seen and felt. and that their needs are important. And once there's been that space where their needs have been recognized, that's when you can find strategies. You know, that's where you can find something that's going to work, you know, and feel good for everybody. You know, it's because you know that, well, this one wants to stay because, you know, stay a little bit longer because, you know, she wants to do this, or, you know, this one really wants to get on the road so that he can do this. And now you have an understanding of what it is they're needing.
Sure.
You really need to have some more time with your friends here. That seems like that's really important to you.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that in mind as we're moving forward.
Well, you know, you nailed it, really. Our middle child is very, very social, and all of our kids are social, but he really desires, you know, like friend connection on a regular basis. And, you know, his desire to delay the trip a week or two really had more to do with who was going to be here at the campground. For those of you that don't know, we live in a motorhome. We've got a 40-foot motor bus that's been home since 2011, and we love it. But when there's a certain time frame when other friends will be camping close by, it's very clear. So when we drilled into it, like you just said, you know, what's driving this? It was really about that connection. It wasn't about resisting getting on the road as much as not being with those friends. So is it other friends? Is it other places? Can we plan to meet up with those friends? You know, drilling into it a few layers deep usually ferrets out a solution. And
right.
Yeah, so I usually try to ask why at least a few times in a non-threatening way.
Right, because it's never just on the surface. It's never just, you know, it's a lot of parents just see the resistance and go, oh, you always do this. You know, you just don't want to cooperate, or, you know, you don't want, and it's usually it's not that. Usually it's something else that's driving it, some other need that's driving it, and we're just not looking there.
Sure. I mentioned Costa Rica a second ago in my travel example. So it got me thinking about you in Costa Rica. So those of you that don't know, we're going to try a little retreat getaway junket this year where we'll open ourselves to the consciously parenting audience and the rethinking unschooling audience, and see if anybody wants to join us for an international retreat in Costa Rica this fall of 2015. Dates to be announced soon, but Rebecca will be one of our featured speakers, so we'll have a chance to hang out with her in a more intimate, relaxed setting. Not that RE isn't relaxed, but you know, for those of you that want to travel internationally, this could be a really fun way to drop yourself at the edge of the earth in the middle of the eco rainforest lowlands of Costa Rica. Is it a little too early to talk content? Have you thought much about, you know, the sort of things you want to cover there, or your site's set more immediately focused?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about just creating a space where people can kind of drop into their story a little bit, whatever that story is. You know, I want to create the space where people, if they want to look at their birth story, if they want to look at their child's birth story, if they want to do some of that, that they can open up that space. If they want to look at something else that's going on, I want to create that space for them to do that. You know, what is the story? What's the story that's showing up in their lives right now? What's working about the story and what's not? Right. So that's the theme that keeps coming up every time I think of Costa Rica and being in that space.
I think the flow of that event, you know, having a week in the jungle, you know, at a wonderful property and resort, but it's a very casual pace and just relaxed, earthy environment. So I think just let that story take its time to trickle out. I think it'll be an amazing event. Have access to the likes of yourself and the rest of the tribe that'll join. I think there's going to be a lot of intimate sharing and good stories coming out of that, no doubt.
Absolutely.
I like to ask our audience and our speakers as well what they're rethinking, because that's the driver for what happens at the Rethinking Everything Conference. We know unschooling and things of that nature are annual must-haves. When I asked you that question, you're talking about marriage. And, not to put you on the spot, but I guess I kind of just did. What in the space of rethinking marriage? What are the thoughts that come to mind there?
I so wish I had had some more time to write a whole blog about the whole thing, because it's just been fascinating to look at all of the different aspects of why do we do it this way? Why? What, why do we have flowers? Why, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And what do we want? What is important to us that we create? And so, we're getting married on summer solstice, and it seemed appropriate that it's the longest day of the year, the most sunlight, and we're going to get married at sunset on the beach. So it just, that part, just, this is who we are. And I think that that's really kind of one of the biggest things that we've come to is we've got a lot of things culturally. It's kind of like everything. And we're kind of looking at them and saying, well, I like this. I don't like this. What is it that we're trying to do? We want something that feels good and authentic for us. And who cares about the rest? So, we're going to have live music. We're going to actually walk into a spiral, and then get married and then walk back out of the spiral. We're going to have live music. We're going to have drumming on the beach right after we get married, with chanting. I mean, this is going to be so much fun. I can't wait. So
great.
Just, it's not going to be much like any wedding I've ever been to. Just perfect.
Well, for those of you that are Facebook friends with me, you may have seen a post over the weekend. My daughter and I were making Play-Doh creations. My wife Kelly puts together this concoction of homemade, medley of ingredients, and it becomes Play-Doh magically. And so she was out, and the little one and I were making these creations, and she wanted to make a cake, and the cake quickly turned into a wedding cake because it had multiple layers, which prompted her to ask me the story. Daddy, when Mommy walked down the aisle, so she already had envisioned an aisle and a gown and whatever else is going on this cake culture, when Mommy walked down the aisle, what song did she walk down to? And, I reflected back for a second because I remember many of the songs from the wedding because we picked them very intentionally, but that one was music only. There's no words. So I had to think about medley. And when I didn't answer in about a second or two, she gave me this, furrowed eyebrow look like, Daddy. And she called it Wise Men Say. And then it's like right away, I'm like, okay, fools rush in. So we chose that one very intentionally, and we had a big laugh about it later afterwards. Like what a song to pick, Fools Rush In. I had to remember, why do we pick Fools Rush In? And it was because so much of our wedding was intentional, like our vows that we wrote ourselves. But, it had to do with this notion of whether it's deemed right or wrong or well thought out or not, call us foolish. But this is, our intuition says this is spot on, and we're doing this. We'd only known each other a year or whatever. And, months later, not many months later, we've got number one on the way. And we just, we took a deep dive, and, there've been all sorts of great times and some tough ones too, but fools rush in. So we thought about that. Like, does that still work for us? Like, does that still make sense? I mean, we were never really huge Elvis fans or anything like that, but the notion of if foolish means it's following my gut and my intuition and just knowing when I know something for the sake of knowing it, then call it whatever the hell you want. Put any label on it you want. If I'm foolish, great, but that's what we're doing. And we probably made a lot of moves, including buying this Rethinking Everything conference. It may look a little foolish to the outside, but we're just following intuition. And that's, if we do anything out of this, we want to hone that. And you'd asked me earlier about, we mentioned about weddings, and that's how I knew that was what you were rethinking. We wrote our own vows, and our vows were largely based on the book Conversations with God, and sort of, if your highest self, the grandest version of the greatest vision of yourself were to speak on your behalf, what would that version say? Well, how would I show up my highest and most enlightened self? And we came to grips with why we were doing it, why we were getting married, and yet at the same time not making any promises. So I don't want to make you promises that in 50 years I will have and hold until death do us part and all that, because you may not like me, or I may not like you. It may not work then at that time for either of us. So rather than make these arbitrary commitments or promises, let's just say we're in this for now, and as long as it's right and feels good. And it was more elaborate than that, but that's the crux of it. Because it allows each of us to elevate to our highest self, that greatest version of the grandest vision. And the partnering and the requiring myself and herself to become vulnerable and to share things with one another, and to maintain our independence and yet share all at the same time was, a big piece of what that was all about. So when we rethought marriage early on, it started with the writing of the vows, and we did other things conventional, the flowers and the violin or whatever as we were walking down. We also had bagpipes and a big tent for no reason. I wanted bagpipes.
You get to make it up. It's your day. You can do whatever you want. I want a spiral.
Exactly. A friend of mine looked at me at the end of the ceremony when this bagpiper was blowing Michael Row Your Boat Ashore or something, and he said, "Aren't you Irish? Isn't that Scottish? What's the connection here? I don't get this." I just like them.
I like it. It's good.
It's one of those instruments that about half of the audience is like, you kind of like it. It's hard to listen to. And the other half was, just smiling away. So
it is kind of a polarizing instrument.
We went down the path of rethinking marriage too. We'll definitely share more thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your blog post when you write that one. So I want to go back to a few things that I think all interrelate, and it has to do with tribe. So you talked about, you've got your own tribe that you're developing online. You host events in your home or near you where you have a local tribe come in. We have tribe beginning with the Rethinking Dad, where guys are coming together online. We have Rethinking the Conference, where a nationwide spectrum of unschoolers gather annually. And then, of course, within our local unique friend base, we have this tribe. So tribe is a really particular word, and I'm wondering what value you see in tribe or disadvantage in the lack thereof right now. So parents needing a tribe, or the value of what a tribe could be. Tell me about that.
So, a couple of years back, I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Bruce Perry, and he was talking about parenting, and he was talking about especially children who had experienced trauma, and we were looking at more high risk. But what he said was, for most of time, we have lived in groups of 50 to 60 people. We have had, lots of people around to help support families. It isn't just one mother, one father, or one person in a house by themselves raising their child alone by themselves all day. And so for most of time, so we think about, in our genetics, in the epigenetic realm, this is who we are. This is what we're designed. We're designed to be in relationship. And so it's in our cells, this need. And then when you look around, I in one of my books, I think it was my first book, I wrote about a mom, and she has 3 kids. Her husband was working all day, and she spent all of her day taking care of everybody. And then, writing it, I really got tired. Just, she was describing her day and what she'd done, and I was just exhausted. We're just not meant to do everything. And then our children also need the benefit of other people who are good role models. I think the challenge that we get into, especially when we're parenting different, is that our family, our biological family, may not really get what we're doing. They may not support us in what we're doing. And so it becomes even more important to choose a family that will support you, that will be there when you have a question come up, or when you have a concern about your child, or when you just need another set of hands. We're just not designed to do this all on our own. We're just not. So we need spaces where we can talk about these things. We need spaces where we can support one another. And that was one of the really beautiful things I saw at RE last year, is all these families who are all, it doesn't matter whose child it was, who if the child needs something, someone would jump in. If a mother needed something, there was a mother who was having a really hard day with her little one, and she was really upset. She was crying in the hallway, and there were like 4 people who came around to support her. Like, that's what we need. We aren't designed to do this by ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up when we struggle.
Well said. Yeah. The notion of tribe, and it is definitely lost. There was common language, common understanding, and common need. Back in the day when we talked about eating what you kill, a pack went out in the morning, and it was just understood that some people will be fetching water and other people would be preparing a fire, and there was a need, physiological needs there. But there was also an understanding that even if it was celebration day, or it was our Sunday day off, or whatever it was, and a child needed some attention, that I could pretty much count on the surrounding folks to more or less parent the way I would parent, because we have a common ideology. And I really agree with what you said about, a lot of times the family isn't on board because it's a break and it's a departure from what was done one generation ago. So, my folks and I, we've had this conversation that what we're doing now doesn't look like the way you do it or did it. And, probably what you did, it wasn't exactly like the way the grandparents did it, probably closer. But
probably.
We're making a more radical departure, but it's an investment of where we want it to go. So, you can be affected by that or not, or just join it. And frankly, unfortunately, they were all there for RE last year, and they got a chance to see it play out. And they're like, oh, it's not just you. There is a, nationwide fabric of people who are striking out to be more conscious. It was pretty neat to see that evolve. But I think tribe is really valuable. Epigenetics, the study of chemical reactions and factors that influence them, is I had to look that up. I know we've spoken about it before. Is that Bruce Lipton and his work?
Bruce Lipton, yep. And epigenetics, the way that I have a friend who's an epigeneticist, and I sat down with her and I said, all right, explain this to me because I don't get it. And she was actually a geneticist. She studied, her name is Charan Sudar, and she had studied genetics and worked in Children's Hospital in London for 12 years. And she finally said, we're missing something, we're missing a piece. And she read Bruce Lipton's book. She defines it as everything above the genes. So we have we have our genetic makeup, but we've got, I think, I always forget. I always ask her how many, 50,000 different genes or 30,000 different genes. There's a lot of these genes, and they can be turned on and off. They can be, it's not, oh, well, you've got this cancer gene, and so you're going to develop this. It's what are all of the factors all around it that influence it, which include your attitude, which include your lifestyle, which include the community that you live in, which includes how supported you feel or how unsupported you feel. All of those other factors influence how your genes express themselves.
That's fascinating. All the internal and external variables that drive your physiological reactions to things. Fascinating stuff. Well, I would definitely like to hear more about that. And that's something we discussed it last year, and I think we kind of ran out of room before we got to that.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of interest within the community on that. So maybe you'll help us navigate to your friend in London or do some additional research on that. So is there anything like your next thing that you're thinking about? What's next for you? Are you wrestling with a big notion or an idea, or is this thing you're a little nervous about, maybe want to go down the path and start learning about?
Well, I wanted to share, I'm doing this other project that I'm really excited about. So if I can go there real quick. I'm doing a project with Kindred Media, and it's called Parenting as a Hero's Journey.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating. And it's a month-long or about 3-week retreat with some really amazing people. And we call them the guides. And we're all blazing our own trail. This is very much in alignment with rethinking. We're rethinking things, but how do we do it? How do we how do we create a container for us to do it? How do we navigate it when we get stuck? And we started with Robin Grill and looking at the inner child journey, and how when we're struggling in our parenting, how our own story can be influencing what we're seeing and how we're perceiving what our child needs. And so he walked us through this beautiful exercise to kind of get yourself out of it so that you can actually see your child. So they're all like this. They're all these brilliant tools where parents can explore, where it's not, this is the way you need to do it, but like Kelly Wendorf was all about finding your own inner wisdom.
Right.
And how do you do that? So I'm really, really excited about this project, and I think that maybe some of your listeners might also enjoy just sticking a toe in and seeing what this is about. It's really neat.
It was a couple of weeks ago I spoke with Lisa Reagan from Kindred, and she was telling me about the momentum you have with this project and her own excitement about that. And it got me looking into it, and I wrote down book titles from Robin Grill, and I wanted to explore this a little bit more. So definitely let's connect the dots and help our audience and listeners get to that material, because I think that's really worthwhile. And for what it's worth, as long as we're mentioning it, Kindred and the environment that Lisa and her team cultivate is really fantastic. I mean, it's a large dose of curating, but it's curating all the topics that Rethinking meets about. So it's as if on some scale we're the experiential version of what Lisa and her team curates. So our desire is to have the likes of Robin, or this, the hero's journey, or at least the content. If we can't have the person, we certainly would like content discussed about. But whether we do that in Little Rock, Arkansas this September 4th through the 7th, or whether we do it online or in Costa Rica with Rebecca and her crew, we look forward to our own journey, maybe learning about hero's journey and whatever you have next. So come armed with stories of the hero's journey, if you would. It'll help enlighten all of us. So, well, this has been a real treat. It really has. As much as we have a chance to interface periodically, I'm really glad we got to share another piece of you and your insights with the audience. So good luck in 13 days.
Thank you.
Beachside spiral with the drum circle. That's going to be awesome. Looking forward to that. And we'll see you in about 88 days in Little Rock, Arkansas for the Rethinking Conference 2015. So, Rebecca Thompson.
To it.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Take care.